Let's talk about Dries Van Noten. Let's talk about Dries Van Noten. This is very interesting because, of course, it was announced not like a few months ago, not too long ago, that Julian Klausner was the new creative director of Dries Van Noten, taking over from Dries Van Noten himself, who basically took a step back from the brand after a very, very, very long span in fashion. Julian, of course, was in the design team internally at Dries Van Noten at the time he was appointed as a creative director, which I'm always a fan of. I mean, we've seen that with unveiled too, hiring internal designers. I really love that because you're hiring someone that really truly understands the ethos of the brand because, Julian worked with Dries Van Noten himself. Also, Dries Van Noten, even though he took a step back from the brand as the creative director, he still said that he's consulting for the brand. He's still there if they need anything. He's still there helping with, ideas. So it's not like his input is still on the brand, even though Julian is designing. Now, this was his debut collection, but I wouldn't really call it his debut collection. I think we can call this a soft launch because it wasn't completely designed by him. It was designed by the Dries Van Noten design team and it was kind of edited by Julian. So it's not really his. And I think the reason why they mentioned it in the press release saying that, this collection was just edited by Julian, it was really designed by the Dries design team, was to say that this is actually not really truly his debut collection. It's kind of a soft debut collection. It's kind of like an intro into kind of how we are going to understand Julian's idea for Dries Van Noten and what his aesthetic of Dries Van Noten will eventually end up being. So that was kind of the case. Not to say, obviously, he had a lot of design input, but it was kind of like this collaborative effort between him and the team for the most part. So to kind of describe what we were seeing, I think someone was asking if there was a runway show. There wasn't a runway show for this collection. It was just like a presentation. There wasn't a runway show. The first runway show he's going to be doing is going to be in March. It's going to be a Dries Van Noten womenswear show. So that's going to be the first runway show. So I think this collection was very romantic. It had a lot of different feminine touches. I mean, we saw different elements that were an ode to Dries Van Noten. We saw the flowers. We know Dries loves flowers. That's kind of, become a house code of Dries Van Noten. This is a very good point. Reminded me of Sebastian Munier's Unveiled. That's the first thing that came to mind. Because I do think Sebastian Munier at Unveiled, he used to use a lot of color sometimes. But when he didn't use color, his collections would look kind of like this. Kind of romantic. They would use these kind of like satin silk fabrics, these kind of more like soft touch fabrics, the brooches, the kind of Edwardian looking collars. Like that is a very Sebastian Munier under Millimeter thing. And that was the first thing that came to mind when I looked at this Dries Van Noten collection. And something that I thought about when I looked at this collection, let me just go through the looks as I'm talking through it. I was thinking something that was not Dries Van Noten to me about this collection. It was a bit like, to me at least, Dries Van Noten, yes, it's about the fabrics, it's about this romanticism, it's about, color and certain things. And we did get pops of color here. But a big part of what Dries Van Noten is fabric experimentation. So trying to mix fabrics and colors and prints and patterns that shouldn't work together. And it's kind of like this mismatch of, clashing fabrics and stuff. That's what makes Dries Van Noten fun. That's what makes Dries Van Noten interesting, at least to me. I didn't really get a lot of that in this collection. And that's what, when people say, they can see Sebastian Munier under enemies, that I perfectly see that. I know exactly what you guys are talking about. Like, we see the pussy bows. Some people mention Alessandro Michele. I kind of see what you're saying. Of course, this, once again, is a very Dries Van Noten thing. The embellishments, the embroidery, Dries Van Noten is famous for the Indian artisans that the brand works with and the fact they have someone on board. I mean, if you watch the Dries Van Noten documentary, they talk about it in that. Very famous for that. So that's a very Dries house code thing. But I thought we were going to see like more of that, but just through the lens of Julian. But I did like this sort of romantic, excessive pussy blow, like collar sort of thing with the leather gloves, the, wire lace as a belt. It was cool. It had really nice, fun details. It was slightly, we can describe it as safe, but I know the women's wear collection is going to be more interesting because this is kind of a soft launch. I really think romanticism in menswear will become increasingly popular over the years. Yeah, for sure. And once again, we just talked earlier about, you know, Le Mer menswear and just the state of menswear in general, and menswear not being interesting. So something I really appreciate about this, even in, you know, garments that are more simple, this is cool, right? Because you can see like the rope shoulder, you can see like what would appear to be, obviously the shoulder detailing would be really interesting, but what would appear to be a more plain coat has all these intricate details on the inside in a very Dries Van Noten way. And that's really cool. Like focusing on the lining, and it's all about kind of what you know is on the inside rather than what other people can see on the outside, right? That's really, really interesting. I like that. I like that touch. You can even see like some more floral prints, but kind of flowers that have been smudged to make a print. That's really cool. I like that. I also like how the imagery looks, by the way. The imagery is really, really nice. Really, really nice. But yeah, I wonder why there's a big focus on the sleeves. Yeah, like these kind of sleeves, right? They're called like leg of mutton. It's where like the shoulder is wide. It's wide at the shoulder and then it comes in at the wrist. And this is like, it's associated with like a certain like time period in history, right? That seemed to be a very clear focus in this collection. Wait, someone is saying Palomo, Spain. Okay, I can see that. I can see that. Slightly. I can see that. Which is interesting, the design choice. Is this... Anytime I see feathers, I always think more Andermenemeister than Dries Van Noten, because obviously feathers are so important to the House of Andermenemeister as a house code, right? So that is, like, when people say, once again, going back to Sebastian Munier, I see it. This coat was one of my favorites from the collection. I love this kind of faded looking print. It almost looks like, you know, when photographers do like some backlit stuff and play with lighting and then they get imagery that looks like that. That's kind of what it reminded me of. I did read that a big inspiration point from this collection was the Wild Boys, William Burroughs' The Wild Boys, which is kind of an interesting... I feel like fashion people are kind of obsessed with things like the Wild Boys, because the Wild Boys, when you think of the Wild Boys, you think of David Bowie, and you think of, even I think the weapons that they used in it was a Bowie knife, right? It was called the Bowie knife. And then it was kind of like one of the trappings of what became part of David Bowie's like character, his like alter ego. So it's a very like, it's such a fashion reference to say, yeah, like this was also inspired by the Wild Boys, like William Burroughs' The Wild Boys. That's such a fashion thing. I wonder if that's an actual real flower. Like, it looks like a real flower. A lot of 80s Miami high fashion with 80s glamour fashion is going to be a hit for men, and women's wear with the glamour romantic looks along with 90s fashion. We shall see. I do want fashion to be more interesting, especially in menswear, because our options are very limited. And obviously this is a menswear collection, which is why it's relevant to talk about this when we're talking about menswear. This is a nice pinstripe, by the way. We don't get a lot of pinstripe in this kind of color. This is beautiful. With the shoulder detail too. Wide sleeves. I love that. Has a nice shape too. But yeah, I think, if anything, this is a sign that there's some very good stuff to come from Julian. I think there's going to be some amazing stuff to come. And I mean, I would describe... Am I a Dries Van Noten customer? I mean, I was in Antwerp not too long ago and I picked up like a lace shirt and I bought some perfume. So I guess I can describe myself as a Dries Van Noten customer. But every time I go to Antwerp, I always go into the store. So if Julian does make nice menswear like this consistently, I'm going to have a ball. He said... Pinstripe in brown for menswear being uncommon. Girl, it's uncommon. Like in menswear, every tailor under the sun, when they make pinstripe suits, pinstripes, like anything pinstripe, it's either grey, charcoal, navy, or black. That's it. You can find, you know, different colors and stuff, but for the most part, you know, menswear, all it is just navy, charcoal, black, and grey. That's it. It's just... same thing over and over and over again. David says, this is some of my favorite menswear I've seen in a long time. Yeah, it was really good. Really, really good. And I think Dries Van Noten is about to become a really, really good, successful brand financially. Because if you think of, and shout out to my audience, right? Because I've mentioned this before, but some of you might not know this. So there was someone that reached out to me. I never say his name because I don't know if he wants me to be saying his name on a live stream, but there's a guy who reached out to me who works in the fragrance industry, and he's like worked in the fragrance industry for like really long. He's an expert on that industry. And we just had a really long conversation about the fragrance industry, how that sits in fashion, different things about fragrances, different things about fashion. And we talked about Pooch, which is the brand that owns Dries Van Noten, right? And it's so important because if you look at what brands, let me Google it, what brands does Pooch? And then you have a look at the brands that they own. So just have a look at the brands that they own. And you have to think also historically, it's a company that specializes in fragrances, right? So you look, they have Carolina Herrera, Jean Paul Gaultier, Dries Van Noten, Nina Ricci, Paco Rabanne. Well, Rabanne, right? What do all those companies have in common, right? They all have ultra successful fragrance lines. Carolina Herrera does crazy numbers fragrance-wise. Jean-Paul Gaultier almost always has one of the best-selling fragrances at any given time. I mean, Rabanne, where do we begin with that? Nina Ricci, where do we begin with that? And of course, they launched the Dries Van Noten fragrance line, and it's something that they're pushing. And I honestly think because they just know what they're doing when it comes to fragrances, it's only a matter of time before, they're going to make the Dries Van Noten fragrances cash cows. Because they know what they're doing. That's their background. That's what they've always done historically. All the brands that they own are ultra successful commercially when it comes to fragrances. So it's only a matter of time before Dries does that. And why this is very important is because if they make loads of money, that means that they'll have more money to develop the clothing and the garments, which means better fashion. So I'm a fan of Pooch coming in and doing all this stuff with the fragrances. Hopefully they don't do the conglomerate thing and start cutting corners over time with the garments. But in terms of making money, they are about to make a lot of money. I mean, I've been monitoring how people are taking to the Dries Van Noten fragrances. Not many people knew about them for a very long time. And then more recently, over the past 3 months, I've seen the Dries Van Noten fragrances really exploding. So it's only a matter of time before Dries catapults into the stratosphere. I can see it.